another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. On tonight's show, we're doing things a little bit differently than we normally would do. When I was pitching this show to Rogers back in the late summer, I went around to some of my colleagues at the Gilbert Centre where we're filming today and asked for ideas on what the show should look like. And one of the ideas that came from my colleague, Ali Tuckey, they suggested a segment called Asking for a Friend. This was based on a Facebook post that I had done a few weeks prior to that, and I thought it was a great idea. We haven't been able to incorporate any of that Asking for a Friend in our shows to date, but this show is all that. Year's program coordinator, Evan McRaney. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Appreciate you being here. So let's hear your questions. Asking for a friend. How do I come out to my parents? There's no standard answer for this. I came out very late in life. I was 38 years old, and I came out to my parents by having them come visit me in my home and meet my then boyfriend for the very first time, who they thought was just my roommate. So it wasn't difficult for me when I made the decision. Obviously, it took me 38 years, so there are some challenges around that. But how do you tell your parents or come out to your parents? The same way you do anything, in my opinion anyway, is be honest with them and let them know that this is me living my authentic self, and be honest with them. My mom, they both cried. My mom sort of said, well, she always knew, and my dad's response was, but you were married and you always had a girlfriend. And so, what about you? What's your response to that question?
In terms of coming out to parents, I think having a safety plan just in case is pretty important, especially for youth.
Sure.
If they're living at home, if they're worried about rejection or being kicked out, make sure you have a safe person and a safe place to go to. If your parents don't take it well, maybe have a number on you for external support. If it doesn't go well, I was really lucky when I came out. I came out at about 17 first. I mean, I've come out several times over in my life.
That's another aspect of this question.
Yeah. You're always coming out.
You're always coming out to someone at some point, no matter what.
And it took my parents a couple of years to come to terms with it. I first came out as a lesbian, and then when I came out as trans, that was a little more difficult for them to handle. But again, I was really lucky. I've had really supportive people all my life, and a few years after I first came out, my aunt actually came out in her late 50s. So you don't have to do it right away, but it's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
And parents hopefully will love you for who you are. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's certainly the most important aspect. Certainly at any age, but more so for youth who are coming out and are brave enough to be able to take that step at a young age to ensure you have that safety factor. That's very true. But as we said at the start of this question, there's no pat answer for this. Everyone is different, and we have to realize that folks come out in their own time on their own agenda.
Yeah. Great way to be an ally is to let Two-Spirit LGBTQ folks speak, amplify their voices, center their voices, make sure they're heard. We don't want things like policies made about queer people without our voices being included. Stand up when you see homophobia and transphobia, biphobia. Use your privilege to be supportive of the community instead of knocking it down.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I'm a big believer of see something, say something, and if you witness homophobia and don't say something, then that, in my book, makes you complicit. So being an ally isn't wearing a button that says ally that has a rainbow in the background. It's actually doing the work. And as Evan mentioned, the best way to do that is to ask folks, what do you need from me as an ally? And then do it. Just do it. I'm a Nike ad today. Disclosing your child as queer or as trans or living with HIV, any of those disclosures is up to the individual, not even up to the parent. As much as that parent may love their child, that's not their choice. It's their child's choice. So how do you tell your friends and family about it? You go to that individual and ask them if they're comfortable with disclosing that information, and get permission to do so first, because your child may want to do it in a different way than you as a parent would. Thoughts?
No, I fully agree with that. It could compromise somebody's safety if another community member knows that they're LGBTQ, in terms of job searches, in terms of housing searches.
Yeah.
You never know who in the community could be discriminatory.
Right. Or even another family member.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So again, I definitely back up what Randy said, and you know, if the child is fine with you telling whoever you want, then be proud of your child.
Absolutely.
And support them. And if they tell someone who is unsupportive, then that parent needs to make a decision about whether they want that person in their life.
I guess there's always the stereotypes of masc and femme is a big one for me, and that a true gay man either can or can't have a feminine side as well. It really irks me when people try and put individuals, regardless of their gender or sexuality, in a box and say black and white, this is what it looks like. There is something called the spectrum, and we all live on this spectrum, and some of us are in the middle, some of us are one end, some of us go back and forth. And I think the biggest thing that irks me is people that just can't accept the diversity within this already marginalized and very diverse group. That really irks me.
Mm-hmm. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people talk about looking gay. Mm-hmm. You don't look like a lesbian, you don't look like a gay man, you don't look trans. What does that even mean?
Absolutely.
Gay people are everywhere. They look like literally anyone. And it's really confining for somebody, especially somebody coming out saying, well, maybe I'm not because I don't look this way, or I don't conform to this stereotype.
Yeah.
And they can be really damaging.
Yeah, and on that same vein, what really bugs me is when folks talk about our community and, you know, why do you have to shove your sexuality in my face? Well, number one, I'm not. I'm just being me. But number two, why do you need a gay pride parade, for example? And those sort of questions that, and those stereotypes around the fact that that we're flaunting this lifestyle choice. We're a mostly marginalized group of folks. Some of us have more privilege in that marginalization than others, but bottom line is we have, for years, not had a platform. We have been shoved in a closet and forgotten about, and in many cases, our lives have been threatened for who we are. And I think it's important that we celebrate our authentic selves and let the rest of the population know that we exist and we're not going anywhere.
There's a lot of confusion about trans people in terms of if I go from male to female, is that person a woman? The answer is yes. If they identify as a woman, we consider them to be women. But then sexuality sort of clouds the waters a little bit. And so if you say, well, I'm a gay trans man, you can see people's gears turning, and they're like, okay, so there are like several things for them to figure out. But if you identify as a man and you're attracted to man, I identify as gay, queer, pansexual, any number of things. Like gender, sexual orientation does not need a box. Straight or gay, well, it could change day by day. It could change based on how the person's gender is being presented that day of someone you're attracted to. So it's really fluid. If you're going by sort of binary genders and sexual orientations, then if a trans person was attracted to somebody of the same sex, again, what is sex? What are we defining that as? But yes, they can be queer, they can be straight. There are trans folk of all sexual orientations. Again, the spectrum, trans people can be asexual, they can be very sexual. Yep. So yeah, it's so fluid.
I think the short answer to that question is none of your business. Why does it matter?
Good answer.
Oh, this is an easy one. Ask.
3 letters.
Ask.
Ask. Like anything else that you're unsure of, if you're lost, would you not ask someone for direction?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're unsure about something, ask. Even if you assume somebody's pronoun, it's always great to ask first. You can't tell just by looking at a person what pronoun or gender they use.
But
Randy's superpower.
Bisexuality is just like any sexuality on the spectrum. There are some folks who self-identify as bisexual because they enjoy both male and female sexual encounters. But that does not mean that that individual necessarily identifies as gay or lesbian. And there is no black and white. This has been something that I've heard for years. You know, a bi guy is just a guy who isn't ready to admit that he's gay. You know, I call BS on that. It's just another stop along the spectrum of sexuality.
Sure, and some people do use it as a stop, as a safe sort of in between while they're figuring things out. But that doesn't mean that all bi people are on the fence. It's kind of the root of biphobia as well, which is rampant in queer communities. Bi erasure and invisibility is a big issue as well. But absolutely, it's a very valid sexual identity for a lot of people.
It's just a phase.
I mean, be confident in who you are and understand that it's a process and a journey, and for some people it might be a phase, and so what? It really, honestly, people are so concerned with who somebody is sleeping with, and you know, where's the freedom? Where's the, you know, people can love who they want to love. And you know, a friend of my parents, when I came out as trans, thought it was a phase, and so far it's been a 20-year phase. So, I mean, you just have to really own who you are and be confident, and provide them with maybe some education and some resources.
Yeah, very true. Some phases last a lifetime. And as a parent myself, it's difficult to admit as a parent that I'm not an expert at everything. And coming out to your parents and then telling you that it's just a phase, you know what, that may be their perception. So again, it is important to educate your parents. They don't know everything, and use the resources out there. Places like PFLAG, for example, that parents can go to and get educated around what it means to have a queer child. Because it's all about at the end of the day making sure your child is safe and loving them no matter what. Because I've said this on the show before when we've had folks on. Queer kids who have supportive parents are queer kids who are here tomorrow. You know, it's about whether or not you want your child around and have them in your life. Because quite frankly, if my children decided they were queer, you know, I obviously would stand behind them and celebrate them. But my biggest concern with my child or my children and most parents is making sure your child is safe. That is your number one job as a parent. And you need to be supportive of that child to make sure they are safe. We're gay. We love flags. All the colors. Come on.
So many colors.
There's so many flags because within our community there are many sub-communities, and they need and require the attention and the legitimacy, just like the rainbow flag that is supposed to cover all of us within the queer community. Some folks don't see that it does. So who cares? What's wrong with having a flag that represents the trans community or represents bears? Yeah, there are so many flags that I can't go through them all right now. But
there are well over a dozen. And yeah, it's about celebrating your culture and your lifestyle and your community.
Yeah, every nation has their own flag.
Sure.
So, you know.
Anyone can have a flag. If
coat of arms are flags.
Jealous of our flags? Make a flag.
Make your own flag. Yeah. That's how this epidemic has been portrayed since the beginning of the epidemic. And while yes, the gay community, gay men in particular, have been particularly affected by HIV and AIDS, that's not the only story out there. There are women living with HIV. There are children living with HIV. There are people of color living with HIV. Any individual on this planet it has a possibility of becoming affected with HIV. And when we think of places like sub-Saharan Africa, where the majority of people living with HIV are women and children, and mostly people of color. And a lot of the time, certainly in popular culture and media, when we see movies about folks living with HIV, it's gay white guys. And that's not the entire story of HIV, not even close to it. I take a drug called Dovato that's manufactured by ViiV Healthcare. It's one pill a day. It's about yay big. I take it every morning when I get up and go about my day. As I've often said, I take more vitamins than I do antiretroviral meds. That's just my story. There are other folks, there are a myriad of antiretrovirals that folks can take. I was on a different drug when I was first diagnosed. It was a combination of 3 drugs in one pill. But when Dovato came on the market as 2 drugs in one pill, I thought, well, if I can take 2 drugs instead of 3 in a pill that does the same effect and suppresses my viral load, keeps me undetectable, so therefore I am untransmittable, why put 2 toxins in my body when I can, or 3 rather, when I can just put 2 in? And it's been working great ever since I made the switch. There are others that take more. Certainly a lot of long-term survivors can take still what they call a cocktail of 2 or 3 different drugs. But it's all about giving folks choice. Some folks are happy to remain on those regimens. Others want to switch to a 1 drug a day if it is effective for them. And we're very soon going to have injectables where a needle in the butt once a month will keep HIV at suppressed levels. So again, we're not able to transmit the virus. never be at zero until we have a cure for HIV. And everyone is different depending on, again, how long they've been living with HIV, what their doctor recommends, other choices within their lives. I am tested every 3 months, not only for HIV to make sure that the drugs are working to keep my viral load suppressed, viral load being the amount of the virus that's in my bloodstream, but I also get tested for every other STI that's out there every 3 months as well, because I like to protect myself and my partners. What do you think?
I think I'm really hopeful. If you compare today to 20, 30 years ago, the LGBTQ community has come a really long way. By no means is any fight over. I see folks, especially on social media, who say, well, everyone accepts it now. What do you need? And an example in Barrie especially is when the Rainbow Crosswalk went in,
right,
and it was defaced within days. So there are still battles to be fought and won. I see the youth coming up today are really socially conscious, and that gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Yeah, I agree. It's a battle that I don't think will ever end. And we see that every day with the stigma that queer folks face. As you all know, we have the Be My HIV Valentine coming up here in Barrie on Valentine's Day, all about folks living with HIV preparing a meal to smash the stigma around folks being afraid to eat a meal prepared by someone living with HIV. And we have seen that stigma present itself very vividly in our attempts to sell tickets to some folks for this event, who, when they ask more details and find out the fact that they're going to be eating a meal prepared by someone living with HIV, and they have decided, no, I don't think I want to spend my money and put myself at risk. And that's just ridiculous, because there is zero risk. These are, again, stigmas and misinformation that dates back 35 plus years from the beginning of the epidemic. Things have changed. We know more. And if people would just educate themselves, stigma is a combination of ignorance and fear. And hopefully answering questions like this and doing events like Be My HIV Valentine, especially in a very conservative area like Barrie and the rest of Simcoe County, is important to get that message out that there is no risk. You do not need to be afraid of folks living with HIV. Well, certainly from my perspective, I think that future is now. I don't think these questions need to be asked. I think if someone has concerns or has these questions, there are tons of resources out there to get the information and get the answers. Google is a wonderful thing. You don't have to ask me these questions or Evan these questions. Google it and educate yourself. You know, that's the best way to answer a question. I certainly do that in things that I'm unaware of or don't have the answer for. Generally speaking, I prefer to try and find that answer on my own. I'm also very stubborn, so I want people to think I know the answer anyway. So I'm going to go out there and find the answers on my own. So I would hope that in the future, yes, I don't think these questions need to be asked. Do I think that's realistic? No. I think there will always be folks that aren't willing to research and learn and are going to ask these questions.
Absolutely. I think, on one hand, I think asking questions is important, but don't expect people to do all the work for you. Don't expect queer folks to do all of the education. It's really emotionally taxing when 30 people a day are asking you the same thing. And again, I think there will always be the ignorance, but there is also always a solution to that ignorance. So it's whether people really want to educate themselves. But I don't think in our lifetime the questions will end.
No, and that goes back to the question about being an ally. You know, if you want to prove yourself to be an ally, then
do the work.
Do the work. Yeah. All right, so and that ends our first segment of Asking for a Friend. Some interesting questions, some, I hesitate to use the word stupid, but some questions that really, in today's day and age, should not need to be asked. What did you think of the questions that?
Again, I don't think any question is really a stupid question, but again, some of them show a lot more ignorance than others, especially around HIV, which, you know, people, there's a real fear of that, and people don't want to learn about it.
Yeah.
But in terms of transmission and food and kissing, and I don't understand it, but I love questions. I do love sharing about queer lives and queer histories, and so I love the segment. But yes, there were a few questions that I found a little trite, maybe.
Yeah, and I guess that's the whole point of the show, right? To be able to give folks a platform to ask these questions. And much like Evan, this is one of the reasons why we do this show, because we want to educate and inform folks and give them the answer to these questions. So I do absolutely appreciate the questions. I encourage you to send in more questions to us, because this is a segment that we absolutely will do again on the show. Maybe in a more lighthearted manner in the future, depending on the questions we get in and our mindset that day. But yeah, please continue to send in questions to Let's Be Perfectly Queer around asking for a friend. You will remain anonymous. We won't call you out or judge you for your questions asked. But again, as we've talked about a couple of times now, it's important, if you really truly want to be an ally to the community, to do the work. And part of doing that work is absolutely asking questions so you do get the right information. So again, thank you. I applaud you for the questions, and I hope you will tune in next week for another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer.